Hey everybody, this is Terry Mitchell with Voice on Fire, interviews with intention. If you've not been familiar with what I'm doing and you haven't checked out my YouTube channel or my podcasts, you should rock on over and check them out. What I do is interview people that are on a mission to make a difference in the world. They're change makers, they're difference makers, they're life influencers, they're action takers. They've founded something, created something or curated something, and they're out there making a difference, whether in their local community, or in some cases, many of them have got the passion to make a difference globally. And in today's instance, my guest is Sophie Sherwin from the UK. And Sophie's an author amongst many things. And I would love to welcome you to Voice on Fire, Sophie. How are you?
Thank you very much. I am very well, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here, and this is what I love about the internet, is we are globally connecting and we are sharing missions all over the world in different pockets, and certainly that's my vision, is global. Of course, I'm a very go big or go home kind of gal.
Excellent, excellent. And in terms of that very concept, what I love to do to start out with is to find out from the guests that I interview, and in your case today, what is it you do, who you do it for, and why you do it. Let's get into that conversation.
Sure. So I'm a founder of a company called Sophie, and what it was originally set up to allow people to find their freedom, whatever that meant to them. But of course, that's a little bit of a rabbit warren. So I decided to really sort of niche it down. And so what I want to inspire people to get in touch and reconnect with their inner adventurer, and never live with what if. I have a beautiful story behind the reason for that. But I just feel that the cliche of life is too short. And I think through these last few months, which is what's happened on a global scale, is that we have realized that actually life can change in a moment. So why not grab those opportunities, grab those adventures, live our dreams, live our desires, and start having goals of fun, passion, and adventure, rather than get bogged down in life, in what we should do, in what the expectation of everybody else on us, especially as women. So that's my mission, and I'm so passionate about it. I wrote the book, which is to support that mission, and also that. So my audience are women, but of course that doesn't isolate men, because there are many men out there who are stuck and frustrated in life and want to change. And so I come along and I can help people deal with the fear, because fear, shame, guilt often keeps us stuck and frustrated, and it keeps us from moving forward. So I can help people do that. And who am I to tell people what to do, or advise them, or help them on their journeys? I've been there and done that. I have, in the last 5 years, I've moved to 5 different countries. I have also written a book. I've traveled around Canada and the US writing the book. I have overcome amazing fear, and so I think I'm pretty good in the life experience, but also throwing into the recipe, and that is, I have a very psychology background, so I use psychological tools and also psychotherapy as well, and of course my coaching. I actually did health coaching because that's what I was pretty passionate. I like about learning about nutrition, but it was in a very holistic way. So obviously primary foods is all about how we live our life, and that's down to who we have in our life, to how we show up in life, to our careers, to our relationships, to also our environment. Our environment has a great impact on how we live our life and how we show up in the world and how we feel about ourselves. And so what I want to do is to get people excited about having their inner self reflected on their outer world. So let's get the synchronization going, and let's get people excited about life again. We are coming out of these times. The world has shifted, and so let's get people thinking differently.
Absolutely. I absolutely love your passion. It shows through in everything you say. And just to sort of put a bit of a context to this, because we never know when anybody might tune into the internet and follow these interviews, we're currently still going through the global pandemic from the COVID-19 crisis. And in many cases, I'm in Australia, and in particular, I'm in Victoria, which is the southern state most affected in Australia. So we're still under lockdown. There's still minor restrictions being lifted, but unfortunately, as they're doing that, we're having more outbreaks suddenly being reported. So for anyone who's actually tuning into this, that's the changing world that we're talking about throughout this interview, and you'll notice that will be a bit of a theme in many of my interviews as we're still waiting for this crisis to shift. I was really fascinated to hear what you were saying there, Sophie, and if we can mention, just to bring that to the fore, you mentioned that you've travelled and you've overcome some fears by doing some of the amazing things you've done. Tell us a little bit more about that book and the story behind it.
So so the book is called There's Always a Hitch, and what it is it's my travel memoirs interspersed with my mum's diaries, and what she did was she decided at the age of 19 to see the world and become and really get in touch with her adventurer. She was such an adventurous soul. I must say that my mum sadly passed away nearly 12 years ago, so this reconnection with her on a completely different level was very inspiring to me, certainly connecting with that 19-year-old adventurer with her. And so she decided to move from a little village in the north of England called Huddersfield and go to Canada, where she went and she set up in a job, and she was in a place called Fudger House, which was an invitation only place for women to go, and it was almost a home from home, so she learned a lot about life and how to etiquette and things like that. It was almost like a finishing school, but it was for working women, and that was good, but she wanted more. So she then takes up a job in Banff, in the Banff Springs Hotel, as a housekeeper, and she has a brilliant summer there, and she meets two other girls who decide very nonchalantly, let's go backpacking and hitchhike, and let's start in Canada and go all the way down to Mexico. Wow. They had a few $100s each in their pockets, so they went off, got totally oversized backpacks. Didn't realize that, just because they're that big, you've still got to carry them with the weight. So they overpacked, but they set off on an adventure. And so they hitchhiked most of the way, which was great for them because they met incredible people. They were invited because these people who picked them up were so surprised that 3 young women were doing this, because back in 1950s, young girls were expected to either get married or to get a secretarial job, not to hitchhike and backpack around Canada and the US. So they were always pioneers. Fantastic. And what was nice, they did have the support of the families, obviously, which is obviously always a bonus too. And so they were they were offered places to stay, because people just wanted to hear their stories, obviously in the car, and then they were so astounded by their stories, they would then obviously want, oh my God, you must come meet my sister or my family or my wife or whatever. And they had some great adventures. They were taken all over the place, but they also had pretty hair-raising moments too. Okay. Some of the boys got slightly too adventurous, and at one point they were invited to this filmmakers party on Catalina Island, and they were offered some juice because obviously they were underage. So they were offered some juice, and they did actually think it was going to be drugged, which is interesting because, you know, obviously it went on back then. So, but luckily they weren't. They actually got out of the party because they were just feeling very unsafe. So they did have hair-raising moments as well, but I think because there were 3 of them all together, I think that did help their friends cement their friendships. So what I decided to do was to gather the diaries that my mum had written, and also the memorabilia, because she had scrapbooks of all the places she had been, and collected all these leaflets, the ticket stubs, anything that you're given, all the touristy stuff that usually goes in the bin as soon as you get home. But she scrapbooked and sent it back to her parents, and she kept it all. So I decided to go off and visit all the places they did, and it was actually 61 years later. And I talk about the universe a lot because it was the synchronicity with when I wrote the book and I did the traveling. I never realized, and I never consciously did this, but I actually did it exactly the same time they did it, just 60 to 61 years later.
Wow.
Which was absolutely, it was amazing. It wasn't, I didn't do the same route they did. I did a route that I could do, because obviously it's more complicated now, and I couldn't hitchhike. So I was doing as authentically as they did it. So I was doing it on a budget as well, which is not easy. But I did it, and I wrote about it. I wrote about my adventures of doing it. And what was interesting is, as I say, the title is There's Always a Hitch. And that was a title, actually, one of the other girls, a girl called Jerry, who, because at one stage they talked about writing a book, and they came up with this brilliant title, and they were talking about there's always a hitch, as in there's always a hitchhike. Little did I know the universe was sending me the other part of it. There's always a hitch, and there's always a goddamn disaster. So it's just, so this is where it all ties in with my mission of I mean, go for it. If there's something you want to do, I mean, you know, I never thought I'd be able to write a book, but I did, and I published it, and it's selling. And one day my dream for it is to become a movie, and it will get there. And I was very fortunate that I did it last year, obviously before COVID started. I don't know what would have happened if I'd been doing the trip now. I mean, that would have been one big disaster, I guess. Yes, but it was great fun. And it was, so what I wanted to do was, as I say, through the book, to inspire people to get out there and have these adventures. The adventures I talk about are not necessarily all about traveling, because there are people who don't want to travel, who don't like travel. But obviously that's a lot what we talk about, our ultimate goals. But adventures can be anything. It's just that their goals, their passions, and their dreams. And it can be as big as going on a safari trip and riding on the back of an elephant, if that's really what you want to do. I don't advocate or not advocate that, but it could also be reconnecting with an old friend. It could be something as simple as that, or it could be just, yes, writing a poem and getting it published. It could be just learning another language. It could be moving abroad. So adventure, as I say, it's just to get the excitement. It's to deal with the fear, because once you can deal with fear, it makes life a lot easier. Fear is natural, fear is normal, but what we do is we disempower it. And there are many, many tools and ways we can do that. And so when fear shows up in our life, and especially now, as you've mentioned, the COVID already, there's huge collective fear around that right now.
Absolutely.
And how we are coming out of it. And it's just managing, and as I say, disempowering that fear, and also working with and setting free limitations. Because we do have to be realistic. We can't just blatantly go out there to everybody and say, go and do this, go and do that. Because the reality is I mean, even now, with the we can't travel anywhere. So you can't tell somebody to go out and say, yes, go and do this, go and do that. So we have to live also within the limitations, and we've got to be real. But I certainly work with the dreams, the people and the desires, and as I say, working with the inner and the outer self, and just, as I say, just making sure that nobody lives with what if.
Yeah, for sure. And I believe you've got a copy of the book there. You're welcome to flash the copy on screen for everybody to see. So
that's it. Yes,
yeah,
it is
fantastic.
a picture of me and Mum.
Oh, lovely.
So sadly she passed away, so she has certainly been on the journey with me.
I think I think that's quite an amazing feeling it must have brought out in you, to know that each time you were somewhere across Canada or America, you were where your mum had been at a time long before you were even an entity on this planet. So it must have felt quite fascinating and just a really nice, as you say, connection to that moment in your history.
It was, and it's amazing to see how things had actually physically changed. I think one of the most special moments was standing by the Chinese theatre in Hollywood, knowing that she was standing at the same footprints and the same handprints of the celebrities. Marilyn Monroe had just been put down, and she actually mentions Marilyn Monroe, and obviously the other people. That was the most special, because that really hadn't changed in time. Of course, it'd been added to, but certainly not changed. Yeah. So that was very special. There were a couple of the hotels in downtown LA that I go to that they stayed at, and they're now social housing, but the outer facade had not changed. They still had the hotel sign up. Oh, wow. And when I walked into one of them, it looked like it really hadn't changed. It was still something out of the 20s. And so I'm walking down the same Pershing Square in downtown LA, knowing that they had pounded the same pavements, was very special. It was very emotional. There were a few times that I broke down, and I just got used to the stares and the people just thinking, okay, this woman needs sectioning. So I often just sort of walked on very quickly. But it was, yes, it very special. And to learn about how a 19-year-old felt back then traveling too, and the things they saw was, yes, very, very special. And I reconnected with her on a very, very different level. I was very fortunate to have been able to do that.
Yeah, no, I can totally appreciate the value in that. And as you mentioned, the Chinese movie, it's a movie house, I believe, isn't it? You said, yeah. I've stood out the front of it, and I've just been like, wow, I'm in Los Angeles, like, wow. And as much as I have my own view of that, the overall location, because it's so iconic. I had the same feeling when I went to Sydney for the first time. I literally had to go up to the Opera House and touch it. It's like, oh, wow. So there are those moments in our lives where different things within our situations, whatever we've grown up with, can spark a real sense of not so much just reminiscence, but also a need to connect. And I'm interested to hear, with regards to the different visions that you have for what you want to help others achieve, what sort of advice would you give to somebody who really is struggling, and what is it that you do that can bring somebody from a point of that fear? Because we certainly know that fear can suffocate, it can stop, it can put a real like a lead weight around people's feet. What is it that you say, do? What's your approach that helps somebody to take on that fear and realize that living a stifled, fear-driven life just leads to regret in the end? How do you help people to go through those motions?
And that's a great question, Terry. I mean, it's one that, as I say, that fear is normal. It's part of everyday life. We can't escape it. So that is one of the biggest tools that I use, is for people to actually acknowledge it and make friends with it, bring it to the table. We have many, many different parts of us. We have the diva part. We have the over the top person who wants to be seen. We have the shy person. We have the angry. We have such different aspects that we should invite it all to the table. And once we do that, then it often disempowers the fear, because I think that's what the ultimate goal is to, as Susan Jeffers said, feel the fear and do it anyway. I truly believe there are three different fears. We have situational fear. We have just normal everyday fear, but obviously then we have the huge phobias as well. And the phobias are obviously, they're different. But saying that, I'll tell you a funny story. When I gave up work and decided to enter the entrepreneur world, one of my biggest goals I wanted was freedom. I didn't like the fact that I was stuck at the office and most of the days, and my friends were going off for these beautiful business lunches, or they could travel for the weekend off somewhere, and I that's what I wanted. So I had some money behind me, and I decided to quit my job and become an entrepreneur. And so I loved the thought that I could go off, I'd go and just to Stockholm for a few days training, or to Zurich, or wherever I wanted to go, or wherever I was being called to go. But I developed a fear of flying. And what it was actually, what I realized was, because I mean, this is 40 years of flying, never a problem, and it really did develop very quickly as well. And of course I tried all the red wine, overcome fear, the drugs, overcome fear. I tried all of those, and it wasn't working. What I did actually realize, that I was actually manifesting my fear of being an entrepreneur, not having a regular salary at the end, not having control, the lack of control was all manifesting itself in this flying.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting where we put fear. We often put it onto money. Mm-hmm. We put it onto relationships, and so it's very. So what I also teach is, when you're feeling fear, because I get it, it can be so overwhelming. I mean, it can physically be in your body, and it can just render you really not very good. So what I say is, just stop in that moment and just say, what do I need? What do I need right now? Because we often borrow fear from the future and bring it into our present and bring it into the moment. What we need to do is get back into the moment. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, next week. And this virus, the pandemic, the global pandemic, that's the one collective notion that we all know, is that things happen, things stop. The world closed overnight, and we had to adjust, we had to adapt, which obviously we are beautiful creatures who hate change. So people have feared it, some people have embraced it. And I think that what it is that we can't, as many people speak about, we can't control things. We can only control how we react. I always say, don't react in fear. ride out an emotional wave. If you are in fear, as I say, stop, physically stop, because that will bring you back into the moment, and just say, what do I need? And it may just need to put the next step. It could be as small as that. It could be, I need to go and get a shower, or I need to connect with that person, I need to call a client, or I need to do something, whatever it is. Or even if I just need to stop and be still. And it's incredibly powerful, and it seems so simple, but it is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Fear is one of those things. I grew up in a lifestyle that had a lot of fear elements in it, and it took me a long time to break through and break free of. And I felt quite capable after a lot of support and various other things that had to happen, of being able just to quite literally face my fear. And when I say face it, it wasn't that I could go up to, say, let's say it was a fear of heights, not in my case, but just as an example, if it was a fear of heights, it wasn't like I went up on a 30-story building and went out onto the ledge and felt remarkably free. It's not that kind of confront my fear. My fear was more about understanding my own emotions and being able to understand, why was I allowing something from the past to dictate the terms of my current moment, and to be able to diminish the size of that fear, because you probably would relate to a lot of this, and it's probably stuff you speak with your clients about. We often find that fear seems much bigger than what it actually is, and we can blow it out of proportion and it becomes something that seems overwhelming. But when we're able to use certain mind techniques, which I take my clients through, the different techniques that we can use to actually diminish the size of the fear, so that we actually become empowered over and above that fear. It took me a long time to get through that. And the one thing that echoed with what you were saying is just recognizing fear as a natural and normal emotion. It's just sometimes it becomes blown out of proportion, because unless we're familiar with not just the way the mind is working, but also the connection to the body, and how the body's reactions and responses to our thoughts can lead to this cycle that expands and expands the fear. And as you say, sometimes it just takes a moment of just stopping, pausing, and taking a breath, and realizing that we can get in control of it. We may not be able to do it ourselves, which is why people need to reach out to the likes of you. You're someone who can take them through that. So it's fascinating how fear can be something that, though it's natural, and though we all fear it in some capacity, we all feel it in some capacity, it's interesting how, from the perspective you've taken, how you encourage people not only to recognize that fear, but, as you say, given the restrictions and limitations, but going forward, go and do something, experience your life, be out there and take the adventure and just live that experience. Because I think we're both sort of on that same wavelength about, let's not have regret later on. Let's see, what can we do now that will allow us to not have that regret later in any way, shape or form. So I'm fascinated to understand a little bit more about what's taken you on this journey. You mentioned stepping away from the daily job type thing and going into entrepreneurship. This whole concept of knowing your mission and knowing your passion, where do you see what you're doing? Take us through a bit of a journey on that, say in the next 5 to 10 years. How do you see it being something that you can maybe take beyond your current situation, take maybe to a global platform? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure, yes. I just wanted to quickly go back to what you were saying about the fear side of things. And one thing to realize is that actually a lot of the selling techniques are all derived on fear. So we are actually being taught to fear every single day.
Yep.
So I think that's so important to recognize that, because when you get on, if you're wanting to learn something new, especially with the internet now, and we get on these webinars, and obviously people want to make money out of their brilliance, their expertise and things. But what they've done is they have now started selling through fear. Well, it's not started because it's been around for many, many years. I think estate agents were the first, or certainly, and car dealers and people like that. but it's all about the fear of missing out. And I think that it's just something to recognize that fear is around us, and that's why we're heightened. And it's so damaging, as you mentioned about the connection with the body. It's so damaging to the body if you are in this constant heightened stress and this fear. So yes, so it's important to recognize that, and as you say, bring it down, and just recognize it all, and acknowledge it. So I love what you just said just now. I mean, for me, my mission, I mean, I've always wanted, I was asked this question the other day actually about what I wanted to do when I was younger. And I've always wanted to help people, and obviously when I was younger, I loved animals at the time, so I wanted to be a vet. But I realized that sometimes, unfortunately, you've got to make that decision to put them down. So I quickly went on to being a nurse. And then I realized that you can't put people down. So I dismissed that idea as well. And went down the psychotherapy and the psychology route. But what I wanted to do is to give people immediate results. I have been on the end of coaching myself with fantastic coaches, and I get even after one session, it can be incredibly empowering. And so I wanted to work with living in the moment and working with now, the here and now, although I do use obviously psychology, because a lot of our fears and our dreams and our desires are all from our childhood. So it's important to know and learn those, and how we have a relationship with the outer world and other people. I also practice human design, which allows me another dimension, which is more of the actual blueprint of who we are when we're born, in our DNA and in our souls. So I add the spiritual side of it too. So I've always wanted to be global and to inspire as many people to get out of their comfort zone and start really living a life. That, I mean, fear and excitement in the body can feel very much the same. It can feel like the butterflies in the tummy, or the heart, the adrenaline getting pumped. But it's making sure that it's the right one, and we're not putting the stress on the body. But there's nothing like being given a challenge. I really like having a challenge, and then seeing it through and doing it. And we grow in confidence. We then feel that what's the next challenge? What else can I start doing? What else can I put into place? And then you then inspire others. And I mean, for now, as we've mentioned many times with the COVID, let's start thinking about things we can look forward to. We are in a place now that the world has shifted, and we're not going to get back to the way we were before. It's just not going to be there. What we need to do is we need to start becoming more self-reliant. We need to stop getting everything from external sources. Let's start reaching within. And so this is what I want people to do, is to start connecting to what they wanted to do when they were kids. Not necessarily to be specifically what they said at the time, depending on, I mean, funnily enough, the nursing the nursing side of it now would have been amazing to have done, because they are now our heroes and our leaders, the people in the healthcare who've coped on the front line with this pandemic. But let's get back in touch with that side of us, and where has it been lost, and why has it been lost? And often this is where the fear comes in. And also we haven't really talked, and I'm sure you do with your clients too, Terry, is talk about limitations that we place on ourselves. And often it's I mean, one of the biggest messages we give ourselves is we're not enough. And so we feel we don't deserve anything good. We feel we don't deserve to feel happy. For me personally, I struggled for a long, long time. My father died when I was 4 years old, and at the point that I was told, it's a memory that I have, I was having an amazing, ecstatic, funny time with my brothers. We had a swing rope in the garden and we were just messing around on that, and Mum calls us in to break the news to us, and I was 4 and I didn't actually understand what she had meant at the time, but she had my brothers had reacted and they had obviously burst into tears, and so I started crying because everybody else was crying, not really understanding it. So I took that message on for a long, long time into my childhood, to my adulthood, sorry, that with joy comes devastation or sadness, or so if I feel joy, it feels unsafe. So therefore I stop myself from allowing myself to embrace life, because I put the limitations on until I actually recognize that and move through it and healed from it. Do I now then say, okay, what's next? I have an insatiable appetite for new experiences, and whether that's just meeting new people, doing a new hobby, or traveling, it's just, I love it. I love the sense of accomplishment of even just the journey of trying. Is just pretty cool. And you build up resilience, you become more successful. I mean, there's just, the world's your oyster when you start adding this more adventure into your life. Let's get in touch again with the childhood side of things. And so I've just started up a group actually on Facebook called Never Live With What If, and I'm just about to do a 5-day challenge, and it's a bucket list boot camp, and it's how to start creating more adventures in 5 days. And I'm going to be giving a free PDF downloads for getting started, and there are going to be tools and things, and then it's just encouraging people to start thinking and to be okay about life changing again, because it's not going to go back to the way, but it's shifting for good, for the good. The way we lived before was not sustainable, and this is why I truly believe, this is only my belief, this is why we've gone through it. We can't rush around working 24/7. We can't physically sustain that. Emotionally, spiritually, we cannot sustain that. We cannot sustain a lot of the structures and the systems that were in place, so let's look at more communities. Let's get involved with communities. Let's get back to what we want to do, what we enjoy, our passion. And then the ripple effect of that, as you know, probably with your clients, is incredible. You start creating so much more in your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yes.
Yeah, I'm nodding along very merrily, because I'm agreeing with almost everything you say from a perspective of taking it back to that whole concept of self-limitations and where fears are born and things like that. And my background is actually in psychiatric nursing, so I actually did go into nursing, but I kind of, as we were talking and as I was listening to your part of the story, I remember actually it took me back to that moment, and I've had this, this regressive memory several times over, and I kind of laugh about it because, back in the day, in our era when we were little, it's, what do you want to do when you grow up? And it was always the question, and still gets asked today, but it's like, what do you want to do? Because there's always that concept that you have to do something. You have to be some sort of career-minded person or have a job. There's always that. Now, obviously, a little bit before our era, women weren't expected to do quite so much other than become, we had our insignificant jobs that were just those that women were allowed to do while if they weren't at home being parents, because there was that expectation in society. And as we've now grown forward, in my era, it was women often became teachers or nurses. And of course, what did I get as a play kit when I was a little child beside my table and chair set was a little nursing outfit. And it was the nursing stethoscope. It was a doctor and nurse kit. So there was a stethoscope, but there was the nurse's cape and the nurse's hat. So it was already seeded into my head that little girls became nurses. And of course, I didn't expect to become a nurse. In fact, after everything that happened in my world, I didn't know what I was ever going to be capable of being. But it became quite obvious that because of the concept of fear, I needed to address that fear. And one of the things I decided to do was either I was going to be a psychologist or I was going to become a nurse. And I kind of meshed the two together, as it turned out, by becoming a psychiatric nurse. So just when I was hearing your sharing of the story there, one of the things that became kind of clear in what you and I both seem to have a general mission of is understanding that in the here and now, this is the time when you can go forward and make choices. And it really doesn't matter in one sense. So it's kind of like this, there's a sort of, I'm not going to set a scale so much, but on one hand, you've got, it really doesn't matter what's happened. You can't change what's happened. If you want to take it and go forward, it's time to not let things hold you back. That said, we have so many things that we don't realize hold us back. And it's those fears and the limitations and the social conditioning and so many other things. And I think it's really important that COVID has given us one thing. And while I don't know what the world has gone through the world over, but I have been trying to keep pace with some people in various countries where COVID has had a terrible effect, trying to be respectful and grateful and understand it's not like my world, which has been fairly uninterrupted. I respect that COVID has given a lot of those of us in the advanced world, or not the third world, so to speak, an opportunity to realise that there will be people who aren't coping. And the one thing that COVID did for me is helped me to realise that I cope remarkably well with a lot of things. And it gave me the opportunity to see, well, if I'm in the position that I'm in, I need to help people who are not where I am. And one of the things I'm finding with these interviews, and again, you've spotlighted it and highlighted it for within your own situation, is we've reached that point in our world where so many of us are gifted and capable of helping those who aren't. And they may well become gifted and capable themselves, but they need somebody to hear them, to listen to them, to inspire them, and to motivate them, and just basically be that person to help them get there. So in that respect, I applaud what you're doing, because we need more people that are doing those exact things, helping people to realise that they have so much more within them, and what it takes, even if it takes a global crisis for us to recognise that fear is definitely something we can fall into the trap of, and we can become paralysed and not live life because of fear, or we can realise that in the scheme of things, there are ways to manage that fear, and the ways to manage what the next day might look like, and what the next year might look like, and what the world can look like for us. And I think what you're doing is quite inspirational, in the sense that you're helping people to not only accept and live with that fear in a comfortable way and know that it's going to be there in some capacity, but to not let it hold you back from having a fulfilling and adventurous life. And I love the concept of this adventure, and the idea that it's not just going off and traveling or rock climbing, you know, the Alps or whatever it is. It's an adventure that you define for yourself, something that breaks you out of that limitation of not fulfilling whatever it is that matters to you. I mean, even the Voice on Fire concept, 18 months ago, I would never have been doing this. This is something that's come about because I dared myself to do something that took me out of my comfort zone. And I wasn't comfortable in that comfort zone, I can tell you. So that's what drove me. And I needed to find a way to be comfortable speaking up and having a voice and being the person that I see myself to be. And once I got to this point, it was like, well, I can't just keep it all to myself. And that again became that whole thing. How do I take it out there to people, to inspire people, and to be part of that group of people like yourself? Inspire people to go and discover yourself. And if you need some help to do it, well, that's what we're here for. And I love the concept you mentioned about community. We so need community right now, and not only just that immediate neighbourhood community, but we need community globally. I'm all about global village, and we really need to address some of the stuff that's preventing us from having that. In terms of something you mentioned, and I really want to put the spotlight on this for you, you mentioned your Facebook group, and also that you're doing a 5-day challenge. Is that something that any of the listeners to this particular video or this interview can participate in?
Yeah, they sure can, yes, and the more the merrier. because let's get sort of even just the conversation started. I think it's just, and just the idea there. I think what you just said is beautiful, and I think that certainly that you're inspiring other leaders, and that's what's great about your mission. And the podcast, and giving yourself a voice. And often us as facilitators or consultants or coaches or mentors or whatever we have to label ourselves as, which is one thing that I really struggle with. But we are really about a facilitator between the fears and you know, the limitations. And so we're looking, we're sort of we help people voice what is really going on for them and why they can't stop. Because often when you're in the fear, you can't see anything else. You're so tunnel vision on that fear, and then we can come along and help people out of that, and make them, and well, not make anybody do anything, but help them realize what their potential is and to really get onto that potential. So yeah, so going back to the challenge, as I say, it's just getting people thinking, getting out of their heads and getting into their bodies and what feels good. And I think that it is really important to build these, as you mentioned, about the communities, about building them on what we need in the moment. I mean, I have many different communities depending on what I need, and I dip in and out, because that's what I do. Is I stop. That's my go-to the whole time. Is what do I need? Who do I need to reach out to for this? Who do I need to do for that? And it's great to have them. And as you say, the global aspect of it as well, because it just widens your mind to other people's points of views, because obviously culture has a huge impact, as we're seeing what sadly is going on. Well, no, I say sadly, it's not sadly at all, it's absolutely fantastic. It's blowing everything out of the water and hopefully making the world more inclusive going forward. And I mean, certainly living in Australia with what happened with the indigenous people, you know, I mean, it's you know, it's everywhere. But I mean, that's a completely different conversation. But obviously it's what's happening on top of the pandemic right now, the Black Lives Matter movement, which I wholly 120,000% support. But yeah, so we do get bogged down, and I don't mean that a link from the Black Lives Matter. What I mean is that in our everyday life, we have come to have the shackles of should, of how we should live our life. And so, as I say, the bucket list challenge is just getting back in touch with, well, what if, you know, I did that? What if I looked at that? What if I even dare to dream of what I want to do in the future? And so it's almost a movement, getting back in touch with that and just getting people excited about life again. Life is for living. It's not just a waiting room to die. It's you know, let's put some humor, some lightness, and let's, yeah, as I say, bring the fear to the table, but don't let it overtake our lives. Don't let it overwhelm us, and don't let it keep us stuck and frustrated. So yes, so they can go to my Facebook page, which is So Free, SOPHFREE, and they can join the group. We'd love for people to, and it's a journey that we can all do together, but it's also getting in touch with our individual desires. There's no judgment, no shame, no guilt. As I say, they can be the biggest dreams, they can be the smallest dreams. As you mentioned about mental health through this COVID, it's for some people, just putting one foot on the floor, getting out of bed every day is what they need right now. Whereas others, people, you know, need to start contacting their travel agent and getting their big dreams up and away. So it really is, yes, open to anybody. And it's just all about empowerment, adventure, excitement, and let's get living life again.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I totally agree. There is so much going on. It's just not just COVID, and sadly, it's not even just the impact on people of colour and the Indigenous people in Australia, and it's not just those things. There's also there's been catastrophic floods in some countries. There's been horrendous droughts in some countries, and we're just so often quite sheltered within our own safe world. And sometimes I totally get it. There are some people that need to function within that small, safe world in order to get by each day. But it means, unfortunately, that we become perhaps disconnected and a bit detached from understanding the impact of even the smallest thing that happens as a ripple effect on some of our brothers and sisters in the world who don't have what we have, who don't have the privilege, who don't have the access to resources, who just don't have the safe governments and things like that. It can be things we don't even think about that are impacting people around us. And by living an adventurous life, we can also take that to be, well, what difference can I make on the planet? How can I take that? And if I learn how to find my voice, if I learn how to take that step, if I learn how to just connect with myself again, maybe instead of feeling overwhelmed and frightened by the things going on in the world, or even angry because maybe I have a viewpoint or an opinion about it, instead of just being caught up in those emotions, being able to take the action to do something that actually has a ripple effect in a positive way to help make change and positive change in the world. Because taking a lot from what you're saying, and even the position that I find myself in, I definitely feel that we need to be as vocal as we can to make as many positive ripples on the planet as we can. Life may be short, although when you ask a 100-year-old person if life is short, I'd love to understand what they see of that particular viewpoint. Is life really short? Well, I don't know sometimes. I think life is a real journey, and some people get to experience that journey for a lot longer than others. And I think in some cases we forget the value of that journey, and we perhaps just get lost in the happenings of the everyday. And sometimes we forget to look out there and see that there is an enormous world out there that needs more people to engage on a broader level. So I'm fascinated by what you do. I think just the idea that you can be helping people across the globe to step outside of their fear and be comfortable with their fear, and accept where fear is at, and just all of those acknowledgements within themselves is quite phenomenal. Is there another book in the making, do you think?
There is, yes, certainly. An idea for now. I think at the moment I'm just so involved in my mission, and I mean, you mentioned earlier about visions for the future. Certainly I want my business to be philanthropic in its nature, and I loved what you just said about really appreciating what we do have, even in the times of darkness, because we do have an awful lot more than other people, and you know, so my mission is not just about helping people with that. It will also be about building other communities and reaching out to people who don't necessarily have the funds, and so that certainly is very dear to my heart. I've always worked with either underprivileged or just disabled, or you know, I've always done that. That's just in my nature, and that's another side of things. Yes, book number 2 will be out at some point. These skeletons are being put into place. It's actually going to be a romantic comedy, okay, based on true life, but the main character will have a happy romantic ending, and I haven't had mine yet, so that's where the fiction side comes in.
Maybe you'll write future though.
Well, exactly, that's it. Yes, I'm going to have to create this amazing prince that comes into my life. Yes, but it's all, I mean, it's just all things, ideas. As I say, I really truly believe that there's always a hitch. It was always going to, actually, when I first started thinking about the idea, it was going to be a movie. And it was only when I was at Cannes Film Festival, and I spoke to some filmmakers and directors, and they said, write a book first. And also I wanted to honor my mum's legacy of memorabilia as well, and I couldn't obviously put that in a screenplay. So in a book, it's great. There are 73 images in there, and so it brings it alive. It just brings the journey to life a little bit more. And so this will, yes, it will be a movie at some point. And I want to inspire and reach people through different mediums. I want, and that's why, as I say, the challenge on my Facebook page, and also getting on to speak onto fantastic podcasts like this, getting on virtual stages, through books. And I also I do read chapters of my books as well on I have a page for There's Always a Hitch, and I read and I have fun, because I also digress and add stories that aren't in the book as well. So I digress a lot. So that really is grab a whole bottle of wine and sit back and listen. And so yes, it's just reaching, but it's just finding out what people need and fulfilling that need, and that's really so exciting. And it's great to meet a fellow person with the same mission and same sort of outlook on life. It's great.
Awesome. It's been an awesome conversation, and one thing I'd really like for you to be able to provide to me, so that when I'm loading this particular video to the YouTube channel or to the podcast, in the description there'll be all of Sophie's contact details. So it'll be for the Facebook group, for any website that she's got, in links to buy the book, or anything else that may be a way to contact Sophie if you want to be a part of any of the projects that she's undertaking. All you need to do is contact either myself directly or contact Sophie directly. Either way, we'll make sure that you get the information that you need. And if you are watching this particular YouTube channel and you've experienced any sort of difficulty from any of the subject matter that we've covered, by all means, please do not feel that you have to cope with life on your own. No matter what your circumstance is, there is always somebody who cares, who wants to help. So Sophie's available, I'm available. So if something's touched your heart in this story, if it's a positive thing, that's fantastic. Tell us about it. If it's something that's perhaps caused a little bit of distress for you, don't handle it alone. Just contact either Sophie or myself. We're available, and all you have to do is just reach out. Sophie, it's been fantastic. Thank you for such a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it. And is there anything else you'd like to finish off with?
No, just thank you very much. And I just completely mirror what you've just said about anybody who's struggling, and don't feel that because you don't have the funds, or because you please don't let that stop you reaching out. And I'd be happy to have conversations with people. It's very, very dear to my heart, mental health and mental awareness. But no, just as I say, contact details will be there. Please come join the challenge, get some fun, get some excitement back. And it's been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate you having me on.
Fantastic. No, it's been a really great conversation. Great pleasure to have you. And until next time, this is Voice on Fire Interviews. And stay tuned for the next interview, which will be loaded to YouTube. And all you need to do to find out when the next one is loaded is subscribe to my YouTube channel, and also click the notifications bell so that you're notified for the next time another interview is loaded. Thank you, Sophie, and you have a wonderful day your end, because it's evening my end. Have a great day.
Bye.